Hey guys, tonight we're plunging into the shadows of high stone towers, flickering torchlight, and the rustle of woolen cloaks as you stalk through medieval streets. Imagine cool night air brushing your face while you stare up at impossibly tall church steeples, where small, silent figures scuttle like spiders along ledges carved with saints and gargoyles. The sky smells faintly of smoke and damp stone. But don't get too comfortable, because the truth is, you probably won't survive this world of medieval assassins. Your palms will sweat as you imagine gripping centuries-old stonework, and your knees might knock together at the thought of dangling hundreds of feet above cobblestones. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step carefully into a warren of alleys winding through medieval Europe. The air is cool, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolls midnight. The rhythm of your footsteps echoes off timbered houses and mossy stone walls. You're following a rumor, a whispered story that medieval assassins trained by climbing church walls under cover of darkness. It sounds ridiculous, right? But there's truth hidden in those whispers. Medieval assassins, sometimes mercenaries, sometimes zealots, needed ways to get close to their targets. Churches, with their towering architecture, offered perfect practice grounds for scaling walls, slipping across roofs, and sneaking through hidden passages. You pull your cloak tighter as you imagine pressing your body against cold limestone. Each handhold is slick from centuries of rain, worn smooth where countless fingers once gripped. Historians still argue whether such training was widespread among organized guilds or more the domain of individual thrill-seekers looking for an edge. A sudden draft rattles a wooden shutter above you, and you nearly jump out of your skin. It's easy to forget that even something as noble-seeming as a church could be woven into deadly plots. It's a bit like how people these days use LinkedIn for networking, and occasionally for secret business deals that would make your boss sweat. By day, these same church towers soared above bustling market squares, with priests calling the faithful to prayer. But by night, the towers turned into private obstacle courses. Imagine the quiet creak of leather boots on stone, the slow exhale as you cling to a ledge just wide enough for your toes. Some chroniclers suggest assassins specifically targeted churches because they were trusted spaces. Who'd suspect a dagger hiding behind a stained glass saint? Of course, one mainstream fact we know for sure. Medieval cathedrals were the tallest buildings around, sometimes rising over 300 feet. The spires weren't merely spiritual beacons. They doubled as watchtowers for spotting fires, invaders, or suspicious figures creeping through city gates. And if you're an assassin wanting a bird's-eye view, there's no better place to perch. And here's a fringe tidbit for you. Some medieval treatises on climbing, like the so-called Fechtbücher, actually included chapters on scaling buildings and walls, complete with diagrams of foot placement and rope techniques. So while not every church climber was plotting a murder, the skills absolutely existed and were occasionally borrowed for less than holy purposes. Meanwhile, historians still debate whether these assassins were lone vigilantes, or whether secret guilds taught stealth, climbing, and silent dispatch. Were they part of a shadowy league dedicated to certain rulers, or just freelancers looking for a payday? Nobody's found definitive proof either way, which is perfect if you're the sort who enjoys conspiracies swirling like incense smoke. Picture it now. The chill wind whipping your cloak, bits of old mortar crumbling beneath your fingertips, and the hush of a sleeping city below, all for a chance to slip unseen into a bishop's chamber. or to vanish like a phantom over tiled rooftops. And hey, if your Fitbit existed back then, it'd be screaming at you about your climbing cardio goals. So keep your eyes on the rooftops, because the night and the next church wall might be hiding someone with sharp knives and even sharper secrets. The deeper you wander into these silent medieval streets, the more you feel the truth beneath the legends. You glance up, and the silhouette of a church looms against the stars, its stone gargoyles jutting out like silent watchmen. You step closer until your nose almost brushes the damp, cold rock. Now picture yourself dangling halfway up that tower. Your fingers are cramping around a gargoyle's chipped ear, your toes searching desperately for the next ledge. This isn't some leisurely morning rock climbing class. It's a midnight maneuver that might determine who wakes up breathing. Assassins learned early that stone might look sturdy but can crumble under weight. Medieval masons weren't building handholds with future assassins in mind. Climbing these walls demanded not just strength, but a keen understanding of medieval architecture. One mainstream fact: gargoyles weren't just decorative monsters. They served as elaborate rainspouts, channeling water away from stone walls. But the very mouths that spat rainwater became convenient climbing grips for those bold or desperate enough to try. Yet here's a fringe tidbit. Some chroniclers claimed that pigeons, roosting by the dozens around gargoyles and ledges, sometimes betrayed assassins with a sudden explosion of wings. There's nothing like the thunder of panicked birds in the silent night to ruin your covert mission. Historians still argue whether those stories were exaggerated propaganda to discourage would-be wall climbers, or genuine tales of foiled plots thanks to feathered sentinels. Imagine the scene. You've painstakingly scaled 30 feet of sheer stone. You're sweating, your cloak tangled around your ankles, and you're just reaching for that perfect gargoyle perch when, coo, 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 dozens of pigeons burst skyward like feathery fireworks. It's enough to make you question your career choices. And speaking of grip, medieval climbers relied heavily on leather gloves dusted with powdered chalk, or, occasionally, ground up brick, to increase friction. You can practically feel the gritty powder coating your palms, grating into cuts and scrapes. Here's the thing. Historians still debate whether assassins trained formally in climbing or simply developed techniques on the fly. Some suggest certain mercenary companies, especially in Italy and Germany, offered specialized climbing instruction for stealth missions. Others believe it was purely improvisational, driven by the unique architecture of each city. You picture the rooftops as an assassin's private jungle gym. Narrow ledges barely the width of your foot, gutters gushing water during storms, and everywhere those grotesque stone faces staring blankly into the night. It's easy to see why gargoyles became symbolic guardians against evil spirits. But if you're an assassin, they're more like friends lending you a helping hand, even if it's a clawed paw. Though let's be honest, you'd probably drop your dagger and plummet to your doom before making it halfway up the wall. No shame in that. Medieval assassins were basically the original parkour influencers, minus the Instagram reels. The city below seems impossibly far away. Market stalls are tucked beneath canvas tarps, stray dogs sniffing around barrels. A lone watchman trudges past, lantern bobbing like a firefly, and you're clinging to a gargoyle's horn, praying your leather soles hold steady on slick limestone. Here's a quick modern aside. It's a bit like trying to navigate a modern office without making noise, tiptoeing past your boss's cubicle, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, praying nobody notices you sneaking out early. Except in medieval times, the stakes were slightly higher than getting caught skipping your last Zoom call. Even birds seemed suspicious back then. Remember those pigeons? A single startled bird could blow your entire mission. One assassin in a 14th century Italian chronicle was supposedly captured because a flock of doves suddenly took flight, alerting the guards. Historians can't agree on whether it's true, but it's definitely more dramatic than getting busted by a security camera. So next time you see a gargoyle grinning down at you, remember, it's not just rain, it's spitting. It might have been the silent witness or the unintended accomplice to some of the Middle Ages' darkest plots. As your trembling hands release the gargoyle's chipped ear, you hoist yourself onto a narrow ledge and press your back flat against the cold stone. The wind whistles past your ears, carrying the distant murmur of a city that sleeps below, blissfully unaware of the quiet danger unfolding overhead. Your gaze shifts upward. Above you, the bell tower looms like a fortress in the clouds, its pointed spire silhouetted against a sky dusted with stars. And you know that's your next destination. For medieval assassins, bell towers weren't just religious symbols, they were strategic strongholds. Climbing high gave you not only an escape route, but the perfect vantage point to spy on city gates, noble mansions, or even the town square. The higher you climbed, the more secrets you could harvest. Here's a mainstream fact. Bell towers in the Middle Ages were essential civic tools. Beyond calling the faithful to prayer, they served as fire alarms, signaling bells, and even war alerts. Cities like Florence and Ghent built towering belfries precisely so watchmen could keep an eye out for fires, sieges, or political unrest. But here's the fringe tidbit. There are records of certain bell ringers being recruited as part-time spies. Who better to keep tabs on who entered the church, who confessed their secrets, or who lingered a little too long near the altar, than the fellow who spent his nights perched high above everyone else? Historians still argue whether these bell ringers were merely informants or active participants in clandestine plots. Imagine pulling yourself through a small wooden hatch into the wooden skeleton of the bell tower. Dust motes dance in the moonlight, filtering through narrow slits in the stone. The smell is a pungent cocktail of aged timber, old ropes, and cold iron. In the shadows, you'd often find assassins hiding behind beams, crouched silently while waiting for a signal or the perfect moment to act. And bell towers provided more than concealment. They muffled sound. The groaning timbers, the shifting ropes, the rustling of pigeons above all, combined to mask the faint scuffle of boots. Some accounts tell of assassins posing as church caretakers or sacristans. With a rag in one hand and a bucket in the other, they could wander into the bell tower without raising suspicion. Just another faithful servant tending to God's house. Historians still debate how common this infiltration method was. Some claim that churches were so intertwined with civic life that guards rarely questioned anyone in clerical robes. Others argue that churches were under constant watch, especially in turbulent times when politics and religion tangled like ivy vines. And speaking of politics, think of bell towers as medieval broadcasting stations. When conspiracies unraveled, a bell's sudden peal might signal troops to gather, or townsfolk to arm themselves. Some assassins planned their moves around these bells, waiting for the precise moment when ringing would drown out the sound of violence. One particularly quirky tidbit. In certain cities, local legends claim that bell towers were haunted by ghosts of murdered clergy or traitors hanged high among the beams. Superstition was so strong that even seasoned climbers hesitated to ascend alone at night. Because, honestly, who wants to bump into a translucent monk while balancing on a creaky wooden plank? It's not unlike sneaking into your office's server room, pretending to fix a router while actually spying on everyone's Slack messages. Except, if you slip in a medieval bell tower, it's a 50-foot drop, not a minor HR complaint. The bells themselves were immense bronze beasts, some weighing several tons. Imagine brushing your fingers along their smooth, cold surfaces, knowing that if one began swinging unexpectedly, you'd be flattened like yesterday's oatcake. One chronicler even recorded an assassin who allegedly used the swinging bell as a weapon. As the story goes, he waited until guards passed beneath the tower, then cut the supporting ropes, sending the massive bell crashing down like a divine hammer. Historians still argue whether this dramatic tale is fact or pure medieval fan fiction, but it's certainly entertaining to picture. So you stand there, high above the city, hidden amid beams and ropes. The bell overhead sways gently in the breeze, each shift groaning like an ancient beast. You wipe your palms on your cloak, eyes scanning the rooftops below, and you realize that from this high perch, a single person could alter the fate of an entire city. All you need is the courage to keep climbing, and maybe a strong grip, and a serious disregard for vertigo. Your breath comes in quiet bursts as you slip through the bell tower's hatch and descend into the dim interior of the cathedral. Stone pillars rise around you like petrified trees, their massive shadows shifting with each flicker of torchlight. The cool hush of the nave envelops you, and your footsteps echo so sharply it feels as if the stones themselves might shout out your presence. If you're an assassin, this echo is your mortal enemy. Silent footsteps become a matter of life and death. Imagine creeping across polished stone, every step threatening to send a sound ricocheting through the arches like a dropped spoon in a library. Mainstream fact for you, medieval cathedrals were architectural marvels designed to amplify sound. Priests wanted their sermons and chants to reach every corner, so stone vaults and ribbed ceilings acted like giant acoustic speakers. Unfortunately, that same design made sneaking around incredibly difficult. Yet here's the fringe tidbit. Some medieval manuscripts suggest assassins developed techniques to muffle their footfalls. One text hints at specially padded soles made from layers of felt or raw wool stitched inside thin leather boots. Historians still argue whether these stealth shoes were widely used or just an invention of overactive chroniclers. Imagine slipping your feet into such boots, feeling the soft padding absorb the impact of each step. Even then, you'd have to avoid loose tiles, squeaky wooden planks, and stray bits of fallen masonry waiting to betray you with a single crunch. And while you're tiptoeing, remember that medieval churches weren't merely religious spaces, they were political arenas. Nobles, merchants, and clergy met in shadowed alcoves to plot alliances, arrange marriages, or decide who needed to disappear. An assassin listening nearby might discover secrets worth a king's ransom or a dagger's tip. Historians still debate how often assassins used churches as hunting grounds. Some scholars argue the sanctity of holy spaces deterred violence, while others insist that a hushed nave was precisely where deadly business got done under the guise of piety. Meanwhile, you're busy trying not to sneeze. Centuries of incense, damp stone, and mildew hang heavy in the air. A single cough could doom you. It's a bit like trying to stifle a yawn during a tedious Zoom call, while your boss drones on about quarterly KPIs. Except your life's on the line, rather than just your career trajectory. There's also the risk of running into clergy doing their nightly rounds. Priests carried small lanterns that sent swinging circles of light through the gloom. You duck behind a pillar, heart hammering, watching shadows stretch and bend like silent dancers across the ancient walls. Another hazard, stained glass windows. Beautiful by day, they became security risks by night. The moon might shine through crimson and sapphire panes, casting a sudden splash of coloured light that could silhouette your hiding form like a bug trapped under a lampshade. Not exactly ideal when your job is blending into the darkness. One account from a 15th century French cathedral tells of an assassin caught mid-creep when a sudden shaft of moonlight lit his shadow across the nave's floor. The guards pounced, dragging him screaming toward the crypts below. Historians still argue whether that tale was factual or merely moralistic propaganda about divine punishment for sin. Either way, it's a cautionary tale for the next time you're lurking around a holy place at midnight. Jokes aside, churches were perfect places to pick up gossip. Merchants gossiped about shipments. Clergy whispered about political turmoil. Pilgrims swapped stories from distant lands. If you were quiet and invisible enough, there was no better place to gather intelligence without paying a single coin. But hush now. You freeze as a distant door creaks open. Footsteps approach. The lantern light grows brighter, wavering closer. You flatten yourself against the wall, counting the seconds, praying the priest decides he's too tired for another inspection. Because in medieval times, even a single misstep on cold stone could ring out like a death knell. And trust me, no assassin wants to go down in history as the idiot who got caught because he tripped over a loose tile while wearing stealth slippers. The priest's lantern glow fades into darkness, and you exhale a breath you didn't know you were holding. The cathedral falls silent once more, so silent that even the drip of water echoing from the vaulted ceiling seems scandalously loud. As you slink deeper into the labyrinth of arches and aisles, your eyes catch on shapes carved into stone walls. Crosses, angels, sacred symbols woven into every inch of the cathedral's architecture. And while these emblems might soothe the devout, to an assassin, they were tools. Clever covers for secret messages and clandestine communications. Mainstream fact: religious iconography was everywhere in the Middle Ages. Crosses, fish symbols, and saints' initials adorned buildings, clothing, rings, and seals. They served as both declarations of faith and universal symbols everyone recognized. But here's your fringe tidbit. Some historians suggest assassins and spies hid coded messages within religious symbols, turning innocuous carvings into secret signposts. A slight tilt to a cross's arms, a subtly missing detail in a saint's carving. These might signal a meeting point, a safe house, or even the identity of a target. Historians still argue whether such hidden codes truly existed on a significant scale, or if modern conspiracy theorists are simply projecting Dan Brown vibes onto the medieval world. Picture yourself brushing your fingers across a stone cross, feeling the grooves beneath your fingertips. You'd never know that a single chipped corner might indicate a secret passage 2 streets away. And while religious symbols offered cover, cloaks played their part too. Assassins didn't just wear dark garments for dramatic flair. A long, hooded cloak could obscure weapons, disguise one's silhouette, and help you blend into the crowds of monks, pilgrims, or clergy that constantly stream through medieval churches. Historians still debate whether certain cloak colors signified specific secret groups. Some claim crimson was favored by elite assassins tied to noble families, while others argue black was the only true choice for blending into shadows. And then there's the theory that some assassins disguised themselves as mendicant monks, whose tattered robes offered perfect camouflage. Imagine yourself standing in the nave as a group of monks shuffles past, chanting low prayers. You slip your hood higher, lowering your gaze to avoid scrutiny. The monks barely glance at you. Just another cloaked figure among many. It's rather like modern corporate life, really. Everyone wears roughly the same business casual. and you never know which co-worker is secretly plotting a corporate takeover or stealing your favorite mug from the office kitchen. And speaking of hidden signals, one Italian chronicle tells of assassins who developed coded gestures involving prayer beads. A certain twist of the beads, or a rapid flick of the wrist, allegedly conveyed complex instructions. Whether this actually happened or is the result of overactive monastic gossip remains hotly debated among scholars. But subtlety was key. Churches teemed with watchers. An assassin had to look pious, devoted, and utterly harmless, even as they tracked a target across a sea of flickering candles and golden icons. Yet no matter how well an assassin blended in, danger always lurked. Remember those stone pillars you slipped behind earlier? Sometimes spies were stationed there too, cloaked figures pretending to pray while scanning the congregation for suspicious faces. The watchers were themselves watched. It's exhausting, isn't it? All this sneaking, signaling, and silent observation. You're starting to wish you could simply slap on a name badge reading, "Hello, my name is totally not an assassin." Might save everyone some trouble. Even so, the allure of hidden messages woven into holy places remains irresistible. The very idea that beneath the surface of piety and prayer lay a buzzing network of secrets is enough to keep historians and late-night YouTube viewers awake for hours. So keep your eyes peeled the next time you see an oddly tilted cross or a monk fingering his rosary a bit too precisely. Because in medieval cathedrals, even the holiest symbols might have been whispering murderous secrets to those who knew how to listen. Your hood still pulled low, you slip deeper into the cathedral until the music of distant voices drifts to your ears. Following the soft rise and fall of sound, you find yourself climbing a narrow spiral staircase. The steps are worn smooth from centuries of monks, choir boys, and sometimes those with darker purposes. At the top, you emerge into the choir loft. Wooden beams arch above you, and rows of carved benches face the cavernous nave below. Moonlight filters through stained glass, coloring the floor with shards of crimson and sapphire. It's here that assassins found another perfect hideaway. The choir loft was an excellent vantage point for observation, eavesdropping, and sometimes even a quick escape route if things went sideways. Mainstream fact: choir lofts in medieval cathedrals weren't just for singing. They were strategically important architectural spaces, offering views of nearly the entire church. From here, choir masters and clergy kept order, monitored the congregation, and ensured rituals proceeded smoothly. Yet here's your fringe tidbit. Some chroniclers hint that assassins used choir lofts to store weapons, poisons, and secret correspondence tucked between hymnals and sheet music. Historians still argue whether such stories are based on true incidents or if they've been embellished by imaginative scribes eager for a juicy tale. Picture yourself ducking behind a wooden screen as chanting drifts upward, voices layered in rich harmony. Beneath those sweet harmonies, dangerous secrets swirl. An assassin hidden among the choir might be listening not for musical notes, but for whispered plots carried on the echoes of stone. In some cities, the cathedral was the very heart of political maneuvering. Nobles would slip into side chapels to negotiate alliances or confess their darkest schemes, while assassins perched overhead recorded every damning word. Historians still debate whether cathedral authorities were complicit in these intrigues. Were they turning a blind eye? Or were they, too, gathering intelligence for their own political survival? The line between holy men and power brokers was often as thin as a monk's hairline. And speaking of choirs, remember how we talked about codes hidden in religious symbols? Some believe certain chanted phrases carried secret signals, a shift in melody, an unexpected Latin word dropped into the verses could mean tonight's the night or abort the mission. Again, historians remain divided on whether this was genuine espionage or medieval melodrama. It's not hard to imagine the scenario. A bishop stands in the nave, head bowed in prayer, while an assassin above waits for that subtle cue woven into the hymn. Once it arrives, the assassin slips away, ready to dispatch a noble whose death might shift the balance of power across the realm. Of course, let's not forget the practical hazards. Choir lofts were full of creaky wooden floors, easily giving away an assassin's position if they weren't careful. Imagine trying to sneak silently across planks that have been swelling and shrinking with centuries of humidity. One misplaced step, and you'd sound like someone slamming a cabinet door in an open-plan office. Plus, there's always the danger of a wandering choirmaster appearing to retrieve a forgotten manuscript, only to find you rifling through hymnals for poison vials. Awkward. And let's be real. If you tried hiding up there today, you'd probably trigger a motion detector or accidentally start the church's modern sound system playing Handel's Messiah at full blast. Medieval assassins definitely had their work cut out for them, but at least they didn't have to worry about accidentally activating Bluetooth speakers. Yet the allure of the choir loft remained irresistible. It was the perfect spot for those balancing two identities. Holy servant by day, silent dagger by night. So the next time you look up at a choir loft, remember, the hymns might have been beautiful, but sometimes the real music was the rustle of cloaks and the whisper of secrets waiting to spill into the night. From the quiet loft, you descend again into the main body of the cathedral. The scent of melted wax and old stone envelops you like a heavy cloak. Outside, dawn's pale glow begins to slip between the stained glass windows, casting jeweled patterns across the floor. But you're not done yet, because for medieval assassins, churches were more than training grounds or hideouts. They were launch pads for missions cloaked in holiness, pilgrimages to venerated relics. Mainstream fact, in medieval Europe, relics were big business. Fragments of saints' bones, splinters of the true cross, shreds of holy garments, all were treasured as powerful spiritual artifacts. People traveled hundreds of miles to pray before these sacred objects, hoping for miracles or divine favor. Cathedrals competed to house the most impressive relics, and cities grew wealthy off the flood of pilgrims. But here's the fringe tidbit. Assassins found these pilgrimages offered perfect cover. Amid thousands of devout travelers, it was easy to slip unnoticed across borders, exchange secret messages, or even stalk a target without raising suspicion. Historians still argue whether organized assassin networks systematically exploited pilgrimages, or whether individual killers simply seized a convenient opportunity. Imagine pulling your hood low as you join a throng of pilgrims trudging toward a glittering shrine. You'd blend right in, mumbling prayers, clutching a wooden rosary, and feigning an expression of humble devotion. Meanwhile, your eyes flick from side to side, hunting for the noble whose sudden demise might change a kingdom's fate. Pilgrimages often drew the high and mighty, kings, bishops, wealthy merchants. Such people made tempting targets for those willing to risk eternal damnation for a bag of gold or political leverage. Historians still debate how many high-profile deaths on the road to holy sites were truly accidents or assassinations disguised as unfortunate robberies. It's a question that keeps scholars up at night, poring over ancient chronicles for hints of conspiracy. Picture it. Dusty roads crowded with pilgrims, the clink of coins in alms boxes, the smell of sweat, incense, and horse dung. Everyone's focused on the divine, except you, eyes sharp for danger or opportunity. and relics themselves played a curious role in this web of shadows. Some believe assassins carried small relics as protective charms or even as proof of loyalty to certain secret factions. A scrap of a saint's robe might mark you as part of an underground brotherhood, or it might simply be insurance, a holy token in case your dagger ever found the wrong throat. Of course, relic authenticity was, let's say, flexible. One city might boast a piece of St. Peter's beard. Another swore it had St. Peter's entire skull. Historians still argue whether people truly believed in these objects' powers or knowingly played along for social and political gain. And here's a modern aside for you. It's a bit like brand loyalty today. People will cross continents for a limited edition sneaker or a pop star's concert merch. Different era, same fervor. Except back then, your favorite brand might also shield you from accusations of murder. One curious account from 14th century France tells of a hired killer who planned to strike during a pilgrimage but lost his nerve after viewing the shrine of Saint Denis. Supposedly, he dropped his dagger, burst into tears, and joined the monks instead. Historians still debate whether this conversion was genuine repentance or a clever ploy to escape justice. But one thing's certain. The medieval highways teemed with hidden agendas. Merchants traded silk and spices. Nobles negotiated marriages. Assassins tracked their prey. All under the protective illusion of holy purpose. So next time you hear about a medieval pilgrimage, remember, beneath the prayers and candles, there often lay secrets sharp as any blade. And in the crowd of dusty travelers, you might find someone whose devotion was only skin deep, and whose true business was murder. As you emerge into the crisp dawn air, you join the pilgrims trickling away from the cathedral, each clutching a scrap of cloth, a vial of oil, or a sliver of bone believed to hold miraculous power. But if you're an assassin, your prized possession might be something far less holy and far more lethal. Because tucked into your belt, hidden under folds of your cloak, is a tiny glass vial glinting like a jewel in the sunlight. And this, more than any dagger or sword, might be your deadliest weapon. Mainstream fact: medieval Europe was fascinated, borderline obsessed, with poisons. Apothecaries experimented endlessly, mixing concoctions from herbs, minerals, and animal parts. The nobility feared being poisoned at feasts, and even kings employed official tasters to sample food and drink. But here's the fringe tidbit. Some chroniclers whisper about poison vials hidden inside hymn books. Thin glass tubes could be slipped into the spine of a missal or tucked beneath. Ornate bindings, perfectly disguised among pages of sacred text. Historians still argue whether these tales reflect real tactics or simply Gothic embellishment, designed to make church life sound more thrilling than it usually was. Picture yourself kneeling at a pew, pretending to flip through a hymn book. Your fingers trace the gilded lettering while your other hand discreetly pries open a hidden compartment. Inside gleams a liquid so deadly that a single drop could silence a bishop or a rival assassin before they even finished their final prayer. It's a stark reminder of how closely faith and violence intertwined in medieval life. The same churches that promised salvation were sometimes unwitting accomplices in the quiet dance of death playing out within their walls. Historians still debate the effectiveness of medieval poisons. Recipes varied wildly in strength and reliability. One chronicler describes an assassin who attempted to poison a duke's wine with a blend of nightshade and henbane, only for the victim to vomit spectacularly and survive. Awkward, yet poison remained an alluring weapon. Unlike a dagger, it left fewer witnesses. It was silent, secretive, and if used wisely, could slip blame onto an innocent servant or kitchen maid. Imagine the tension of watching your target raise a goblet to their lips while you pray the liquid does its silent work. Of course, there were practical challenges. Poisons often had strong odors or distinctive colors. Medieval assassins sometimes disguised their brews with honey, spiced wine, or heavily flavored sauces. Picture you hunched over a mortar and pestle, grinding herbs into powder, while muttering a prayer for steady hands. It's not so different from today's elaborate coffee orders, except instead of oat milk and caramel drizzle, you're trying to hide a lethal dose of wolfsbane. There's even a tale from Italy in which an assassin attempted to poison a cardinal's communion wine. Unfortunately for him, the cardinal was running late, and a visiting bishop took the sip instead. Chaos ensued, and historians still argue whether this incident ever truly happened, or was fabricated to emphasize divine punishment for sacrilege. And here's a curious twist. Some medieval assassins believed certain poisons were only effective if accompanied by specific incantations or astrological timings. A few recipes demanded mixing ingredients when Mars stands dominant, or chanting Latin verses as the brew simmered. Whether this was magical thinking or a genuine belief in cosmic influence remains a lively scholarly debate. But one thing's certain: poison was the ultimate equalizer in medieval society. A peasant with the right knowledge could topple a king. A monk with a hidden vial could become judge, jury, and executioner. So next time you flip through a dusty hymn book, remember, those innocent pages might have hidden more than prayers. They might have concealed the very tool that shifted the fate of kingdoms. One silent drop at a time, you slip out of the crowd of pilgrims and back into the cathedral, drawn toward the far wall where rows of tall wooden boxes stand like silent sentinels. Each is draped in a velvet curtain, shadows lingering within. Welcome to one of the most unexpected tools in the medieval assassin's repertoire, the confessional. Mainstream fact: confessionals appeared in medieval churches as private spaces for penitents to confess sins to priests. The concept was simple: a safe, sacred box where secrets were shared under the strict seal of confession. No one, not even kings, could force a priest to reveal what he'd heard inside. But here's the fringe tidbit. Rumor had it that confessionals became convenient hubs for clandestine meetings, secret exchanges, and coded conversations. An assassin might slip inside, not to confess sins, but to collect instructions, pass messages, or receive payment. Historians still argue whether this happened routinely or whether it's another flourish added by imaginative chroniclers hungry for scandal. Imagine drawing back the velvet curtain and stepping into the dim space. The wood creaks as you kneel, pressing your face to the tiny lattice window. On the other side, instead of a gentle priest's whisper, you hear a voice instructing you to eliminate a troublesome noble or deliver a letter across enemy lines. It's deliciously ironic, isn't it? The very chamber built to cleanse souls of sin might also have been a place where sin was plotted in the dead of night. Historians still debate how widespread this secret use of confessionals truly was. Some argue it was rare, pointing out the significant risk of exposure. Others believe that under the veil of sanctity, a surprising amount of espionage and conspiracy unfolded. After all, who would dare interrupt two figures kneeling in sacred conversation? It's a bit like modern corporate one-on-one meetings, ostensibly harmless, but sometimes hiding whispered plans for office coups, covert alliances, or the mysterious disappearance of someone's stapler. The confessional offered anonymity and discretion. Voices were low, faces hidden, and the wooden screen obscured identities. A perfect setting for passing coded messages, small vials, or even slips of parchment. Picture yourself kneeling there, pretending piety while pressing a folded note into a small compartment built into the woodwork. Your contact retrieves it moments later, never revealing their face. It's medieval espionage with a side of incense and Latin prayers. Of course, using a confessional for such purposes wasn't without peril. A wrong word, a curious priest, or a misplaced object could expose the entire plot. And if the church hierarchy discovered assassins abusing the sanctity of confession, the punishment would have been severe, possibly execution, possibly excommunication, or both. One tale from 15th century Spain tells of a hired killer who tried to arrange a contract killing through a confessional. Unfortunately for him, the priest on the other side was fiercely loyal to the local duke. The assassin found himself bound, gagged, and delivered to the duke's dungeon by sunrise. Historians still debate whether this story is fact or moral fable designed to discourage sacrilege. And here's an intriguing modern aside. Some medieval confessionals were equipped with hidden drawers or revolving compartments, designed for discreet exchange of coins or documents. Officially, these were for safe arms collection, but in the assassin's world, they might have served far more nefarious purposes. Imagine it, the faint squeak of wood as a hidden panel slides open, the glint of silver coins, or the cool touch of a glass vial changing hands under the cloak of sacred secrecy. The entire scene as tense as the final moments before hitting send on an email you're not entirely sure you should have written. So next time you see a confessional, remember, behind those velvet curtains, there might once have been more than whispered sins. There might have been secrets sharp enough to bring down kings, all exchanged in a hush beneath the vaulted ceilings of the medieval church. You slip back out into the cathedral nave, heart still pounding from the confessional's dark possibilities. But before you can vanish completely into the gloom, you spot a cluster of boys in white surplices, bustling past with candles and hymn books. Their voices rise in high, pure notes, echoing off the vaulted ceilings like a flock of birds. At first glance, they look innocent enough, barely more than children tasked with lighting candles, singing psalms, and fetching holy water. But if you're an assassin, you know better. Because sometimes, those wide-eyed choir boys knew far more than their sweet voices suggested. Mainstream fact, choir boys were essential members of medieval church life. They learned music, Latin prayers, and ceremonial duties, and they often came from humble families who saw the church as a path to education and advancement. Yet here's the fringe tidbit. Scattered chronicles whisper that choir boys were sometimes recruited as secret messengers. Their small size, ability to move freely around sacred spaces, and natural invisibility to most adults made them perfect couriers for hidden notes or whispered instructions. Historians still argue whether this was genuinely common practice or merely a juicy rumor amplified over time. Picture yourself watching a boy no older than 12 slip behind an altar, only to reappear moments later, pressing a folded piece of parchment into the palm of a waiting monk, or perhaps an assassin cloaked in black. It's a little like modern office interns, supposedly harmless, often overlooked, but sometimes carrying secrets that could topple entire departments, or entire regimes, if we're talking medieval times. These young messengers could move through the cathedral without suspicion. They carried candles to side chapels, assisted priests during mass, and fetched items from hidden storage rooms. Their duties brought them everywhere, and gave them ample chance to listen, observe, and relay information. Historians still debate whether choir boys fully understood the stakes of what they carried. Were they innocent pawns or clever accomplices who knew precisely how dangerous their errands were? Some argue the boys were entirely naive. Others point to records of choir boys being interrogated, or worse, after plots were uncovered. And imagine the tension. A child, trembling as he tucks a note under the binding of a hymn book, glancing around for suspicious eyes. The stakes couldn't have been higher. One slip, one misplaced piece of parchment, and an entire conspiracy might unravel. One recorded incident from 15th century England tells of a choir boy who supposedly carried instructions for an assassination sewn into the lining of his surplice. When guards caught him, the boy confessed everything under pressure. Historians still argue whether the tale is real or a morality fable designed to scare clergy into stricter discipline. Of course, some choir boys were as mischievous as any kids. There are stories of them stealing wine, sneaking coins from offering plates, or sneaking peeks at forbidden scrolls. So the idea that they might dabble in espionage isn't entirely implausible. And here's a modern aside. It's not unlike the stereotype of the office mailroom worker who accidentally discovers a corporate secret while sorting envelopes. Sometimes the smallest figures in the hierarchy wield the sharpest blades, metaphorically, if not always literally. Yet even for those boys who kept secrets, danger was ever present. Discovery could mean brutal punishment, exile from the church, or worse. Imagine being 12 years old and carrying a message that might spark a civil war if it fell into the wrong hands. It's enough to make even the bravest assassin's knees buckle. So next time you hear an angelic choir echoing through a cathedral, remember, behind those pure voices might have been eyes scanning the shadows, hands passing hidden notes, and hearts beating with fear. For in the medieval world, even the smallest singers sometimes knew far too much about the deadly games unfolding beneath the arches of stone. The choir boys drift away, leaving you standing alone beneath towering stained glass windows that blaze like a mosaic of fire as dawn grows stronger. But while these windows were masterpieces of medieval craftsmanship, to assassins, they were also potential tools or deadly obstacles. You tilt your face upward, studying the vivid colors of saints, kings, and dragons captured in shimmering glass. But if you're an assassin plotting escape routes or an entry, these windows mean more than mere beauty. Mainstream fact: stained glass in medieval cathedrals wasn't just decorative. It served as a storytelling device, teaching biblical tales to a largely illiterate population. Each panel was carefully crafted, its images a mix of instruction, devotion, and awe. Yet here's the fringe tidbit. Some chronicles hint that stained glass artists were occasionally recruited as spies. Their workshops gave them access to high places, movement between cities, and connections with clergy and nobility. Historians still argue whether these artisans actively participated in espionage, or whether a few intriguing cases have been blown out of proportion by romantic storytellers. Picture yourself perched behind a stained glass panel, peering through gaps in the lead framework. From here, you might watch noblemen pace below, whispering secrets that could alter entire kingdoms. Or perhaps you're looking for the signal to strike, like a sudden tilt of a candle or the flick of a monk's sleeve. Historians still debate how frequently stained glass windows were used as surveillance points. Some argue the practical challenges were too great. Delicate glass, limited sight lines, and the risk of being spotted. Others insist that hidden passages behind these massive windows provided perfect vantage points for silent watchers. But even without espionage, stained glass posed hazards for assassins. The light streaming through those colored panes could suddenly silhouette your figure, revealing your presence to guards below. Imagine creeping along a narrow balcony only to find yourself bathed in crimson and gold, your shadow falling like an omen across the nave. Not ideal when your profession depends on remaining invisible. There's a recorded incident from 14th century France in which an assassin attempting to cross a cathedral balcony was betrayed by the brilliant glow of stained glass. A shaft of emerald light revealed him in perfect profile, prompting guards to shout and rush the stairs. Historians still argue whether this account is factual or moralistic drama, warning of divine punishment. And here's your modern aside. It's not unlike being caught lurking in your office's glass-walled conference room, thinking you're unseen, only to realize your reflection is perfectly visible to the entire floor. Medieval assassins probably felt much the same, minus the HR meeting afterward. Another curious angle. Stained glass makers possessed specialized knowledge of mineral pigments, glass chemistry, and furnace techniques. Such skills made them valuable to nobles seeking unique works, and potentially to secretive factions wanting coded symbols embedded in glass. Some historians believe certain medieval windows may have included subtle marks, recognizable only to those in the know, pointing towards secret alliances or safe houses. Imagine a tiny alteration in a saint's halo, or an extra swirl in a dragon's tail, a silent message indicating loyalty or danger. Whether these theories are genuine espionage or overblown modern speculation remains hotly debated. But it's the kind of mystery that keeps historians and late-night history channels buzzing. Meanwhile, back in your assassin's shoes, you edge cautiously past a stained glass window. Every step brings the risk of creaking wood, loose tiles, or betraying rays of colored light. You press yourself flat against the stone, praying the sun doesn't climb higher and throw you into dazzling relief. Because in a medieval cathedral, beauty and danger often shimmered side by side. And sometimes, the window meant to illuminate holy truths might also cast an unexpected spotlight on secrets meant to stay in the shadows. So the next time you admire a stained glass masterpiece, remember, it might have been more than art. It might have been a silent accomplice, or an accidental snitch. In the covert games of medieval assassins, you slip away from the stained glass windows, the colored light still flickering in your vision like phantom flames. The cool dawn breeze beckons, and soon you're pushing open a narrow door that leads outside onto the sloping tiles of the cathedral roof. And here, under a sky the color of steel, you become one of the medieval rooftop runners. Mainstream fact: medieval cities were tight clusters of tall buildings, narrow streets, and interconnected rooftops. Chimneys, ridges, and parapets created a hidden highway above the city. For anyone nimble and brave enough, rooftops offered shortcuts, escape routes, and vantage points invisible to ground-level guards. Yet here's the fringe tidbit. Some chronicles claim that rooftop running was not just an improvisation, but an actual skill taught to certain mercenaries and assassins. Training included balancing on sloped tiles, leaping gaps between buildings, and navigating chimneys without sending bricks clattering to the street below. Historians still argue whether these training programs truly existed, or whether they're a romantic invention born from tales of daring rogues. Picture yourself crouched atop curved roof tiles slick with dew. The wind tugs at your cloak as you scan for guards on the street below. Every movement must be careful. Lean too far, and you'll tumble into the market square like a sack of flour. Rooftop routes weren't always reliable. Tiles could crack or shift underfoot. Pigeons might burst into flight at the worst possible moment, flapping and cooing like feathery alarm bells. And even if you crossed one rooftop safely, the next might be blocked by a tall chimney, a spiked parapet, or an inconveniently placed statue of St. Michael waving a sword. Historians still debate whether assassins preferred rooftops or underground tunnels for escape. Some argue rooftops offered speed and unpredictability, while tunnels provided secrecy and fewer witnesses. But tunnels came with their own horrors: pitch-black darkness, rats the size of small dogs, and the risk of collapsing masonry. One account from Venice describes an assassin who leapt from roof to roof to avoid capture after a failed hit on a merchant prince. Guards pursued him across the tiles until a loose terracotta shingle sent him crashing through a baker's ceiling, landing in a flour-dusted heap. Historians still argue whether this dramatic tumble actually happened or was just a colourful anecdote. And here's a modern aside. It's rather like parkour today. People vaulting over railings and sprinting along building edges, though nowadays the biggest danger is spraining an ankle and ending up on a viral fail video instead of facing the executioner's sword. But rooftop running wasn't only about escape. Sometimes assassins use roofs to observe noblemen's houses, track movements across town, or even eavesdrop through open windows. From high above, secrets unfolded in private courtyards. Whispered conversations floated up into the chilly night air, and hidden doors revealed themselves under flickering lanterns. Imagine crouching on the ridge of a roof, your breath puffing out like smoke. Below, two nobles argue in a garden, oblivious to your watchful eyes. Each word they hiss at each other might decide who lives, who dies, and who takes the throne. Yet even the best-trained rooftop runner faced danger. Steep pitches, fragile tiles, or sudden rain could turn a stealthy escape into a lethal plunge. One slip, and an assassin might find himself sprawled in the street, surrounded by curious townsfolk and quickly arriving guards. And the rooftops were often policed in subtle ways. Cathedral watchmen sometimes stationed lookouts on high towers to spot suspicious movement. A black-clad figure leaping from roof to roof wasn't exactly subtle, even in the gloom. So next time you walk through an old European city and glance upward at the tiled roofs, remember, centuries ago, those tiles might have borne the silent footsteps of someone carrying secrets sharp as a dagger. And in the medieval world, the rooftops were more than just architecture. They were the hidden highways where assassins gambled their lives for one more chance to slip away unseen. The chill wind stings your face as you crouch on the cathedral roof, your heart still hammering from your silent rooftop dash. You scan the city below, its labyrinth of alleys slowly waking under the growing daylight. But suddenly, your attention jerks upward to the massive bells swinging overhead in their wooden cradles. Because in the medieval world, bells weren't just for calling the faithful to prayer. Sometimes they became weapons. Mainstream fact, cathedral bells in medieval Europe were colossal works of art and engineering. Many weighed several tons and were cast from carefully blended bronze alloys. Their tolling regulated daily life, marking hours, warning of fires, announcing deaths, or signaling the approach of armies. Yet here's the fringe tidbit. Scattered chronicles claim that assassins occasionally turned bells themselves into deadly traps. By manipulating bell ropes or structural supports, they could create deadly accidents. Historians still argue whether such elaborate murders genuinely occurred, or whether they're sensational legends told by monks eager to dramatize the wages of sin. Picture it. You're an assassin perched in a belfry, eyes glinting in the shadows. Below, guards patrol the nave, oblivious. Overhead, a massive bronze bell swings back and forth like a giant pendulum. A few quick cuts to the ropes, a shove at the right moment, and the bell might come crashing down with a roar, scattering stone chips and leaving chaos in its wake. It sounds fantastical, yet medieval architecture was sometimes fragile enough to make it possible. Bells were mounted on enormous wooden beams that could weaken over time. A precisely timed strike, or sabotage, might indeed bring tons of bronze crashing to earth. Historians still debate one dramatic tale from 15th century Germany, where an assassin allegedly severed a belfry support during Mass, sending a bell plummeting through the wooden floor. The intended victim, a high-ranking bishop, escaped with his life when the bell miraculously landed inches away. Was it divine intervention, or just bad aim? Nobody knows for certain. It's a bit like modern office life, where you sometimes wish you could accidentally topple a massive server rack onto that coworker who keeps microwaving fish. Though in medieval times, the stakes and the bells were considerably heavier. But bells weren't only lethal because of their weight. The very sound they produced could be a weapon. Assassins might exploit the thunderous tolling to mask the sound of a fatal strike or a hurried escape. Imagine plunging a dagger into a victim's ribs just as the bell's deafening clang rolls across the stone vaults. No one would hear a gasp or a gurgle over that metallic roar. One chronicler mentions an assassin who timed his blow precisely as the cathedral bell marked midnight, ensuring the echo swallowed every sound. Historians still argue whether this tale is factual or just the dramatic flourish of scribes eager for a good story. And here's your modern aside. It's like trying to have a whispered office conversation right beside the noisy paper shredder. Except, with considerably higher stakes than losing confidential memos. Another curious angle. Bells sometimes carried political symbolism. In some cities, a specific bell was rung only during coups or uprisings. If an assassin could manipulate when that bell tolled, they might trigger chaos or signal hidden allies to act. Picture yourself crouched on the beam beside the great bell, your knife soaring through the rope, your breath ragged in the chill air. Below, crowds wait for the bell's toll that might summon an army or signal a tyrant's downfall. Yet there was always a risk. Bells were heavy, unpredictable, and capable of splintering beams or collapsing towers if mishandled. Even the boldest assassin might hesitate before weaponizing a giant bronze monster suspended overhead. So next time you hear church bells ringing through an ancient town, remember, once upon a time, their solemn peals might not only have called the faithful to prayer, they might have hidden the final moments of an assassin's deadly work, or even become the weapon that decided who ruled and who fell. You slip back down from the rafters, muscles aching from clinging to beams and dodging swinging bells. Your feet find cool stone again, and as you step deeper into the shadows, a new scent curls around you. Incense, thick as fog, mingling with the sharp tang of metal and something darker still. Because while churches flowed with holy water and incense, medieval assassins sometimes mixed those sacred things with far deadlier brews. Mainstream fact: holy water was a central part of medieval religious life, sprinkled during rituals used to bless homes, or carried by pilgrims in tiny flasks. It was believed to ward off demons and protect the faithful. Yet here's the fringe tidbit. Scattered whispers claim assassins occasionally blended poisons into holy water, turning a symbol of salvation into an instrument of silent death. Historians still argue whether this truly happened, or whether it's another scandalous invention by storytellers determined to spice up ecclesiastical history. Picture yourself kneeling at the font, dipping your fingers into cool, blessed water. But instead of spiritual comfort, imagine you feel a faint sting, a subtle burn as poisoned liquid seeps into tiny cuts on your skin. Historians still debate whether poisoning holy water would even be practical. After all, many fonts were open, exposed to constant public access. Tainted water risked harming innocent bystanders, and poisoning a church's sacred vessel carried the threat of swift, brutal punishment. Yet the idea lingered, a terrifying possibility woven into the shadows of medieval rumour. It's a bit like modern office coffee pots. Everyone shares them, nobody quite trusts them, and there's always a paranoid whisper that someone might slip in. Well, hopefully nothing more sinister than decaf. Medieval assassins, however, played for considerably higher stakes. But poison didn't end with holy water. Monks and apothecaries experimented with countless lethal substances: hemlock, monkshood, belladonna. Some assassins learned to carry tiny packets of dried powder tucked into the folds of their robes, ready to sprinkle into a cup of wine or dust across a wound. And here's your modern aside. It's rather like carrying a mini hot sauce bottle for emergencies, except instead of spicing up bland pasta, you're plotting political murder. Different motives. Same discreet packaging. One particularly haunting story from 15th century Italy tells of an assassin who mixed poison into the incense burned during a high mass. Supposedly, the fumes sent an entire row of nobles reeling, gasping for air, while the intended target staggered forward and collapsed on the marble floor. Historians still argue whether this is pure Gothic fiction or based on a real incident. Incense was perfect cover for more than poison. Its heavy smoke clouded vision and muffled sound, giving assassins brief windows of chaos in which to slip away or strike. Imagine moving through swirling clouds of frankincense, each step cloaked in fragrant darkness. A dagger thrust becomes nearly invisible, a whispered order lost in the swirl of scented haze. Even mixing poisons demanded secrecy and skill. Medieval poisoners often combined herbs according to astrological charts, believing planetary alignments influenced a toxin's strength. Historians still debate whether this was genuine science or pure superstition. But to an assassin, any edge was worth pursuing. Yet all this danger came at a cost. Churches were sacred ground, and any assassin who tainted holy rituals risked more than just mortal punishment. Excommunication, eternal damnation, and gruesome executions awaited those caught sullying God's house with murder. Picture the weight of that decision pressing on your chest. Mix hemlock into the holy water and risk your immortal soul, or let your target live to plot your ruin. That's a choice that would keep even the bravest assassin tossing and turning beneath a straw mattress. So next time you smell incense drifting through a cathedral, remember, in medieval times, that sweet haze might have hidden more than prayers. It might have concealed a plot that could topple a kingdom, or send a soul hurtling into darkness. Drop by poison drop, you leave the smoky tang of incense behind, moving deeper into the cathedral's labyrinth. The hush is broken only by the faint scratching of quills, a rustle of parchment, and the soft flick of turning pages. You've stepped into the realm of the scribes, the silent architects of both salvation and secrets. Because where ink flows, secrets follow. Mainstream fact: medieval monasteries and cathedrals housed scriptoria, dedicated rooms where monks and scribes copied texts by hand. These quiet chambers were the heart of medieval learning, producing religious works, legal records, royal decrees, and everything in between. Yet here's the fringe tidbit. Historians whisper that scriptoria sometimes doubled as clandestine hubs for espionage. Invisible ink, coded marginalia, and false texts were tools not only of scholarship, but of spies and assassins. Historians still argue whether these secret practices were widespread or isolated bursts of clever intrigue. Picture yourself slipping into a scriptorium. The air smells of old vellum, burning oil lamps, and the sharp tang of iron gall ink. Bent figures sit at desks, quills dancing over parchment, each letter a tiny work of art. But one monk glances up, meets your eyes for an instant, then looks quickly away, because perhaps he's not just recording psalms, but transcribing orders for a political murder. Invisible ink was known in medieval Europe. Recipes included lemon juice, milk, or special vine extracts that remained invisible until heated over a flame. Imagine monks passing secret messages hidden between the sacred words of a sermon, knowing that only a trusted ally with the right knowledge could reveal the deadly truth. Historians still debate how often such techniques were used. Some argue it's a romantic exaggeration layered over a simple truth. Monks copied texts. Others believe that in a world where information was power, even holy men were sometimes pulled into the shadows. One account from 15th century France tells of a scribe arrested after a coded message was discovered in the decorative flourishes of a royal decree. The swirling pen strokes weren't mere art. They concealed names, places, and dates meant for an assassin's blade. Historians still argue whether this tale is historical fact or a warning story spun to keep scribes loyal and silent. It's a bit like modern email encryption. You might look at a perfectly innocent PDF, but hidden layers of code carry secrets no one else can see. Only back then, the code was buried beneath Latin prayers and flourishes shaped like vines. Imagine a monk leaning closer to his parchment, carefully extending the curl of a letter just enough to mean strike tonight instead of amen. A single misplaced curve might doom an entire conspiracy or save it. Scriptoria were perfect hiding places. Few outsiders ventured inside, and monks were expected to maintain silence. An assassin could slip in under the guise of delivering a document and leave with intelligence vital to kings and nobles alike. Historians still debate the scale of monastic involvement in espionage. Were entire orders complicit, or were a handful of monks seduced by gold, power, or political loyalty? Evidence remains tantalizingly scarce. And here's your modern aside. It's not so different from that co-worker who accidentally CCs the wrong person on a confidential email, sparking corporate chaos. Only in the medieval world, the stakes were sharper, and usually ended with someone losing their head, rather than just their job. Beyond writing secret messages, scribes also forged documents. A single letter bearing a forged seal could start wars, strip nobles of land, or condemn innocents to execution. One scribe's clever quill might decide the fate of entire kingdoms. So next time you marvel at medieval manuscripts, illuminated letters glowing with gold, pages alive with delicate vines and saints, remember, behind those serene words might have pulsed secrets capable of toppling thrones. And sometimes the deadliest assassin didn't wield a dagger at all, but a quill dripping with invisible ink. You step out of the scriptorium and find yourself drifting toward a place very different from the hushed world of ink and parchment. The smell of roasting meat and spiced wine pulls you forward, deeper into the cathedral's private chambers, until you slip through a carved wooden door and into a room blazing with candlelight. Because if there's one place where assassins thrived, it was at the bishop's dinner table. Mainstream fact. Bishops and high-ranking clergy in medieval Europe often lived in considerable luxury. Their tables groaned with roasted game, honeyed pastries, exotic spices, and barrels of imported wine. Banquets weren't merely about food. They were stages for political maneuvering, negotiations, and subtle displays of power. Yet here's the fringe tidbit. Assassins sometimes infiltrated these lavish feasts, either disguised as servants or bribing kitchen staff. A single drop of poison in a bishop's goblet, or a sliver of tainted meat slipped onto the wrong platter, could decide the fate of kingdoms. Historians still argue whether such dinner-table murders were widespread, or whether chroniclers simply loved weaving deliciously dark tales of treachery. Picture yourself standing in the shadows beside the bishop's long table. Candlelight glimmers off silver dishes. Crystal goblets catch and fracture the light into rainbow sparks. The bishop laughs, leaning close to a nobleman to whisper secrets you dearly love to hear. Meanwhile, servers glide around the room, carrying trays that might bear either delicacies or death. Historians still debate how often assassinations truly occurred at these feasts. Some argue that poisoning was rare, citing the presence of official tasters. Others point to chronicles filled with sudden deaths, mysterious illnesses, and suspiciously convenient political outcomes. And the kitchen was the true battlefield. Spices could disguise bitter flavors. Heavy sauces might hide the taste of certain poisons. An assassin might even slip a toxin into a loaf of bread, knowing that whoever broke it first would receive the fatal dose. One story from 14th century France tells of a banquet where an assassin, disguised as a kitchen boy, poisoned the sauce for a bishop's roast pheasant. The bird was served. The bishop took 2 bites and slumped forward into his golden goblet. Historians still argue whether this dramatic tale is true or a moral warning spun by the clergy. And here's your modern aside. It's a bit like those corporate holiday parties where everyone smiles and exchanges polite laughter while plotting promotions, or quiet revenge over who ate whose yogurt from the break room fridge. Except back then, the stakes were much bloodier than mere office drama. Even beyond poison, feasts were dangerous. Words flowed freely over wine, and one loose tongue could spill secrets worth a fortune, or a life. An assassin could hover nearby, listening for the names of enemies, the hint of rebellion, or the secret alliances that shifted medieval power. Historians still debate whether some bishops actively recruited assassins themselves. After all, the church wasn't above politics. A well-timed removal of a rival noble or troublesome heretic might serve both God and political ambition, or so some clergy convinced themselves. Imagine the bishop swirling wine in his goblet, his eyes glittering above a serene smile. He raises a toast, his voice booming with holy conviction. Meanwhile, you stand a few paces away, cloak wrapped tight, waiting for the signal, a cough, a gesture, a word, to slip poison into the cup. Or perhaps you're the assassin, serving roasted duck with one hand while your other fingers hold a slender vial hidden in your sleeve. Every dish you carry is a gamble. One mistake, one suspicious glance, and you could end up in the cathedral's deepest crypt, your bones left to keep silent vigil beside those of forgotten martyrs. So next time you picture a medieval feast, remember, behind the glittering goblets, the laughter, and the luscious aromas, there might have been deadly intentions swirling among the spices. For in the bishop's hall, faith and power dined together, and sometimes invited death to join them at the table. The warmth and golden light of the bishop's banquet fade behind you as you slip back into the cathedral's chill corridors. Your feet echo softly on ancient stone as you follow a narrow passageway, one you might never have noticed if not for a faint draft whispering along the wall. You press your hand against the cold stone and feel it shift. A hidden panel slides open, revealing a dark corridor stretching into the unknown. And here you step into one of the strangest chapters of the medieval assassin's world, the secrets hidden behind church walls. Mainstream fact, medieval churches were often riddled with hidden chambers, secret staircases, and narrow passages. These spaces served practical purposes: safe storage for treasures, secure routes for clergy, or places of refuge during sieges. Yet here's the fringe tidbit. Some historians suggest these hidden spaces also became dumping grounds for secrets darker than dusty relics. Skeletons, both literal and metaphorical, were sometimes bricked up inside cathedral walls. Historians still argue whether these were plague victims buried in desperation, political prisoners silenced forever, or victims of church intrigues. Picture yourself stepping into a narrow stone corridor barely wide enough for your shoulders. The air grows colder, heavy with the scent of earth, mildew, and old incense. You hold your breath as your fingers brush something rough, and suddenly realize it's a patch of bone jutting from a crumble of mortar. Historians still debate one eerie story from 15th century Italy. During renovations of a cathedral, workers uncovered a skeleton sealed behind a wall, still draped in the tattered remains of what seemed to be clerical robes. Was it a plague priest interred out of fear, or a conspirator silenced to keep secrets hidden? No one knows. It's a bit like discovering a secret compartment in your office filing cabinet, only instead of outdated HR memos, you find, well, a corpse. Medieval life was rarely boring. These passages weren't merely tombs. Assassins sometimes used them to slip between chambers, avoiding prying eyes. Some chroniclers hint at entire underground networks connecting cathedrals to noble residences, perfect for delivering secret messages, or for fleeing unseen after a silent kill. Historians still argue how extensive these tunnels really were. Some claim they're mostly legend, pointing out the massive engineering challenges involved. Others insist there's plenty of evidence, citing hidden doorways and unexpected staircases uncovered during modern restorations. Imagine navigating such a passage in pitch darkness, every step a gamble between safety and discovery. A single cough or the scrape of a boot might alert guards stationed above, and the knowledge that you're surrounded by centuries of hidden deaths doesn't exactly calm your nerves. One French chronicle tells of an assassin who used secret passages to evade capture after stabbing a noble during Mass. Guards scoured the cathedral above while he slipped through a hidden stairway and emerged miles away, disguised as a humble pilgrim. Historians still argue whether this is a historical account or medieval action fiction. Another layer of mystery comes from rumors that church authorities themselves sometimes used these hidden spaces to disappear troublesome figures, heretics, rival clergy, or political threats. Whether that's grim fact or Gothic fantasy remains a matter of scholarly debate. And here's your modern aside. It's not unlike corporate IT locking certain folders, so only top-level executives can see what's inside. Only instead of financial spreadsheets, medieval hidden rooms sometimes contain bodies, or documents capable of bringing kingdoms crashing down. Yet for an assassin, these dark passages were both sanctuary and trap, escape routes, hiding places, or tombs. The line between safety and doom was razor thin. So next time you visit a medieval cathedral and you see a strangely narrow door or a section of wall that looks just a little too perfect, remember, there might be secrets bricked up inside. And maybe, just maybe, the silence you hear isn't the hush of prayer, but the echo of stories left hidden for centuries behind stone. The chill of the hidden passage clings to you as you emerge once more into the soft glow of flickering candles. The cathedral's towering arches loom overhead, but your steps carry you toward an even greater seat of power than stone walls could ever contain. Because for medieval assassins, there was one figure who could shift kingdoms with a single word. A figure robed in white and crowned in gold. And tonight, you stand at the fringes of his shadow. You're stepping into the realm of popes who played politics. Mainstream fact, the medieval papacy was a formidable political force. Far beyond spiritual guidance, popes controlled vast lands, commanded armies, negotiated treaties, and even crowned kings and emperors. Their influence could decide the fate of nations. Yet here's the fringe tidbit. Some historians believe certain popes may have quietly sanctioned assassinations to remove rivals, suppress heresy, or secure papal power. Historians still argue whether these claims reflect grim truth or are merely slanders spread by enemies eager to tarnish the Church's reputation. Picture yourself standing outside the papal chambers. Rich tapestries line the walls. Swiss guards, or their medieval equivalents, stand watch with halberds gleaming. But somewhere behind those gilded doors, a pope might be leaning forward over a heavy oak table, whispering an order that will dispatch a blade across the Alps or slip poison into a Venetian goblet. Historians still debate the notorious tale of Pope Alexander VI, the infamous Borgia Pope of the late 15th century. Though slightly beyond the medieval period, his reign is often invoked as proof of papal involvement in plots and poisonings. Some chronicles insist he orchestrated murders to consolidate family power. Others claim the stories are exaggerated, fueled by political rivals. It's a bit like modern politics, where high-ranking officials deny wrongdoing with serene smiles, even as rumors swirl of secret deals and hushed betrayals. Only in medieval times, the consequences were far sharper than scandalous headlines. Popes weren't only spiritual leaders, they were monarchs in all but name. They commanded spies, gathered intelligence, and manipulated the chessboard of European politics. Some assassins may have found themselves serving papal agendas, removing troublesome nobles, heretics, or rival clerics who threatened Rome's supremacy. One intriguing tale tells of a papal envoy who travelled to a distant kingdom under the guise of delivering holy relics. Hidden in the reliquary, so the rumour goes, was a secret message authorising an assassination. Historians still argue whether this actually happened, or whether it's merely another Gothic flourish in the vast tapestry of church legend. And here's your modern aside. It's like sending an encrypted email labelled official business that actually contains instructions to shift millions in corporate assets, or in the medieval case, shift the very balance of Europe's thrones. Even among devout clergy, there were those who believed the ends justified the means. Maintaining papal influence sometimes meant erasing threats before they could blossom into rebellions or rival claims. Historians still debate whether assassins were regularly on the papal payroll, or whether isolated incidents were twisted into sweeping conspiracies. Some scholars insist there's scant proof of institutional murder. Others argue that the absence of evidence is itself evidence of a well-oiled secret machine. Imagine standing in a dark Vatican hallway, hearing Latin prayers drifting from the chapel, while a cardinal murmurs to you about a noble whose continued existence might weaken the Church's position. Your mission would be shrouded in righteousness and soaked in peril. Of course, such actions came with spiritual peril too. A pope, of all people, ordering a murder? That's a theological paradox that has kept scholars, priests, and laypeople arguing for centuries. Could a man who claimed to be Christ's vicar wield the dagger of an assassin? So next time you see a portrait of a serene medieval pope, fingers raised in blessing, remember, behind the holy facade might have pulsed the same ruthless political calculations as any king or emperor. And sometimes, the man in white might have whispered commands sharp enough to echo in the silent corridors of assassins across Europe. You leave behind the gilded shadows of papal corridors and slip once more into the echoing vastness of the cathedral. The hush seems absolute, until a sudden metallic boom rattles the stained glass windows. The bells are ringing, and in the medieval world, when church bells rang for blood, everyone listened. Mainstream fact, church bells in medieval Europe weren't just instruments for timekeeping or worship. They signaled emergencies, called townsfolk to arms, or summoned crowds for royal proclamations, or grimly, for public executions. Yet here's the fringe tidbit. Some chronicles hint that assassins sometimes participated in public spectacles of violence, either as hired hands carrying out executions, or as masked figures who vanished into the crowd moments after delivering a killing blow. Historians still argue whether assassins truly played official roles in executions, or if chroniclers blended real events with dramatic fiction to spice up the stories. Picture yourself standing in the cathedral square. The great bronze bell swings overhead, its voice rolling like thunder across rooftops. The townsfolk flood into the plaza, murmuring in anxious clusters. A wooden scaffold stands in the center, draped with dark cloth. And there, trussed like a sacrifice, is a condemned man whose crimes range from treason to conspiracy, or perhaps simply knowing secrets dangerous enough to cost him his life. Historians still debate whether public executions were used as a warning to other would-be conspirators. Some argue they were pure theatre, carefully orchestrated to showcase the ruler's power. Others insist they were brutal necessities in a world where law was enforced as much through fear as through justice. But sometimes, the official executioner was absent, sick, or conveniently delayed. And that's where assassins occasionally stepped in. Cloaked figures might slip onto the scaffold, deliver a quick strike, and vanish before the crowd realized what had happened. One chronicle from 15th century Germany tells of a mysterious hooded man who appeared during a chaotic execution, dispatched the condemned with a single blow, then disappeared into the throng. Historians still argue whether this was an assassin fulfilling a private vendetta, or an agent carrying out a quiet political directive under the guise of public justice. And here's your modern aside. It's a bit like corporate firings where the company spokesperson reads a vague, "We wish them well in future endeavors" memo. Only in medieval times, instead of losing your job, you might lose your head. Church bells often rang before executions, summoning the townsfolk as witnesses. Their booming notes were meant to lend solemnity and divine authority to the act. But to assassins lurking nearby, the bells provided perfect cover for the sounds of drawn blades or strangled cries. Imagine standing in the square as the bell tolls, its deep voice vibrating through your bones. Each peal is a drumbeat counting down to death. Meanwhile, in the shifting crowd, an assassin waits for the precise moment to slip close and deliver the final blow. Historians still debate how often rulers used executions as convenient moments to eliminate rivals under the guise of justice. Some suggest entire trials were staged simply to provide an official reason for removing troublesome figures. Others caution that not every execution was a hidden assassination. Sometimes a criminal was simply a criminal. But the spectacle served a purpose. The sight of a severed head or a dangling corpse reminded everyone who held power, and what price awaited those who dared to challenge it. For assassins, it was both a warning and a potential opportunity. So next time you hear the peal of an ancient church bell echoing through a European square, Remember, in medieval times, that ringing might have signaled not just the hour, but the very moment when secrets ended, lives were snuffed out, and silent blades whispered history into the stones. The echoes of the bells still ripple through your bones as you retreat into the dim recesses of the cathedral. The crowds disperse, murmuring prayers or muttering gossip about the execution they've just witnessed. But not everyone leaves. In the shadows of a side chapel, beneath flickering candles and the pale glow of stained glass, a single figure kneels. His cloak hangs heavily around his shoulders, hood pulled low to hide his face. But even without seeing his eyes, you know who he is. You're watching an assassin whisper his last prayer. Mainstream fact, medieval people, even those steeped in violence, were deeply religious. An assassin might spend hours plotting murder, and then beg forgiveness moments before the deed, or just before facing the executioner's blade. Yet here's the fringe tidbit. Some chroniclers suggest certain assassins carried personal saints' medals or relic fragments, believing these holy tokens would shield them from capture or grant mercy in the next world. Historians still argue whether this was sincere faith or a desperate insurance policy for guilty souls. Picture yourself moving closer, the scent of beeswax and old incense heavy in the air. The assassin's lips move silently. His fingers trace the worn edges of a small medallion, perhaps depicting St. Jude, the patron saint of desperate cases. Historians still debate the depth of faith among killers. Were these men devout believers who sinned out of necessity, or ruthless mercenaries paying lip service to religion in hopes of saving their own skin? Some chronicles tell of assassins who confessed in excruciating detail moments before their execution, as if purging the poison from their souls. Others went to the gallows silent and unrepentant, eyes fixed on some unseen horizon. It's a bit like modern corporate types who claim work-life balance but check their email at midnight, professing one creed, practicing another. Medieval assassins might kneel in prayer yet step out moments later to wield a dagger. One chilling tale from 15th century Spain recounts an assassin who, after a life of silent killings, was caught and sentenced to die. He requested to pray alone in the cathedral. When guards finally entered, they found him weeping before a crucifix. Historians still argue whether his remorse was genuine or a final act in a lifelong performance. As you watch, the assassin rises slowly. His eyes shine with tears, but his jaw is set. He knows what waits outside these stone walls, the rope, the sword, or worse, the knowledge that he might have failed, and that someone still lives who was supposed to die. Historians still debate whether any assassin ever truly found peace. Could a man whose trade was silence and death ever lay down his burdens? Or was the shadow of his deeds destined to follow him into eternity? Even the church wrestled with these questions. Some clergy argued that forgiveness was always possible if the sinner truly repented. Others insisted that certain crimes, like murder for hire, stained the soul beyond absolution. And here's your modern aside. It's not so different from those high-stakes jobs today. Lawyers, spies, surgeons, where a single mistake can mean ruin, and the weight of each decision presses heavily long after the office lights go out. The assassin bows his head one last time, whispering words too soft to hear. Then he turns, steps into the aisle, and disappears into the deeper shadows of the cathedral. Whether he walks to freedom, the gallows, or some hidden chamber waiting with a fresh blade, that remains unwritten. So next time you stand in a medieval cathedral, gazing up at its lofty arches, remember, the silence may carry echoes of whispered prayers from those who lived by the knife. and even the most hardened assassins sometimes knelt before the altar, seeking forgiveness for secrets too dark to ever speak aloud. Now, as the echoes fade and the cathedral's great doors drift closed, the shadows grow long and soft around you. The torchlight flickers lower, casting gentle patterns across cool stone. The night, once alive with secrets and silent blades, begins to settle into a deep and tender hush. Your breathing slows as you remember each hidden staircase, each silent cloister, each cold rooftop where medieval assassins once prowled beneath the stars. The distant clang of bells has softened to a memory, no longer signaling danger, but tolling softly like a lullaby across the centuries. Outside, the moon climbs high, its glow gentle and reassuring. The chill wind that once carried whispers of conspiracy now carries only the scent of moss and the faint sweetness of old incense. The world feels distant and safe. The assassins, their secrets, their sharp daggers and sharper minds fade gently into the shadows from which they came. Their footsteps still echo through the cathedrals of your imagination, but the danger has passed, leaving only curiosity and a quiet sense of wonder. Let your shoulders relax. Feel the cool stone under your fingertips. Let your eyes grow heavy as you remember gargoyles staring into moonlight, hidden passages winding into darkness, and silent prayers whispered by trembling lips. In this gentle darkness, there's nothing left to fear, only the soft rustle of your breath and the soothing hush of time flowing onward. Rest easy, knowing that tonight, the secrets stay safely locked behind ancient walls. Sleep well, dream gently, and may the cathedral's quiet keep you safe until morning light.